Welcome to Wisco Dice. Hey yo, folks! I am your host, the Cozy with the Most, and I am joined today by.
Hey, it's Justin, the Meeples champion.
I'm Matt, the Ghost Walker.
And I'm Suzanne.
And this is episode 122 of the Wisco Dice Tabletop Gaming Podcast. And today is April 24th, 2024. On today's episode, we'll cover exploring our favorite games to play as the bad guy. Because you know what? Sometimes it's good to be bad. With that, let's roll into it. Hey guys, I think first thing we want to probably do and talk real quick is, before we get into some of these games, because we're excited to talk about games like usual, is make sure that we set a kind of idea for the audience as to what kind of games we thought we could include or talk about in this kind of summary. Does everybody have to play the bad guy to be on our list today?
Oh, definitely not. I think we cover some games where it's one versus many scenario, where there's good guys versus bad guys. We cover some stuff where the bad guys might not be known at the beginning of the game.
Are there some games on this list that have everybody playing bad guys?
Oh, there definitely are some games where everybody's the bad person.
And most importantly, are there any games on this list where everybody's good guys?
Nope.
Because good guys aren't fun.
Well, not for what we're talking about today. They're not.
All right. Suzanne, why don't you kick us off? What's one of those wonderful games that you think is amazing fun to play as the bad guy?
So one of my games that I like being the bad guy are hidden traitor games, such as Among Cultists by Godot Games and Nemesis with Awakened Realms. Like in Among Cultists, you know if you're the bad guy at the beginning, but no one else does, and so you have to act like you are not. So you're just kind of playing along, and with Nemesis, you may or may not know, I don't believe, depending on which scenario you're playing, if you are trying to sabotage everyone either. So I like those because you're guessing and you're trying to keep everyone guessing and throwing them off and playing a little bit of hide and seek on a board game, which I think is fun. But I usually end up being picked as the traitor all the time, so I'm getting used to it now.
You're pretty good at it too.
You resemble a traitor.
Thanks. I don't think
wow.
You also generally have a point at Suzanne. Is she the traitor? Yep. You can almost tell.
Unfortunately, now I've been the traitor so many times by default that people just assume that I'm the traitor.
Sounds like we should get some Battlestar Galactica to the table so that we can start calling you a toaster early.
I have never actually played that game, so
I haven't had the chance.
Saturday.
Oh man, you guys.
There's toasters in the making.
I think when a lot of you guys, when it first came out, had not moved back to town yet. A lot of you guys were kind of playing it back before I moved back.
Yeah, I did kind of have a window, I suppose. You could have missed the sort of popular window for that. That's true. But it's such a classic. That's my go-to for thinking about hidden traitor games. It's so fun to play a Cylon in that game and just slowly sabotage the ship until you find that perfect moment to reveal yourself and just ruin everything.
See, isn't that great? It's like you don't have to actually figure out how to win the game. You just have to figure out how to make other people not win.
Mm.
And if you're really good, you do the thing where you're just sowing doubt among all of them, getting them to accuse each other, getting people locked in the brig or sent out the airlock, and you're just sitting there playing innocent.
That's what a toaster would definitely say.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now I want to play the game. So,
You're going to be a good guy on that. You know it.
Well,
so.
Since folks can't get back to Galactica these days, if you get Unfathomable, it's Battlestar Galactica with Cthulhu mythos on it. So at least you can still get a copy of it and play now.
Well, so that's good. So yeah, so those are kind of my favorite. I also really like the games where you're the bad guy and you get to play and kind of personify a well-known bad guy, like in Villainous. You want to be Captain Hook and you get to act how he does. So it's just, and that to me, those are kind of just like silly, fun, act it out. Everyone acts out Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, but you're always looked down and looked kind of weird at as a kid if you're acting out Captain Hook.
Well, Peter Pan was the villain in that film. I mean, I don't know how many people realize that, but you know. But no, Villainous is a good fun. I mean, I will tell you, playing as the bad guy isn't really my favorite thing in board games, and frankly, I don't have a lot in my collection that would qualify it in this category. But Villainous is just kind of a fun one. My kids own several different versions of it, and we have like different Marvel ones and the Disney ones, and it is very fun. It's themey, but it's light too. It's not like you're, doing all these horrific things to people, but you are.
It's a very take that kind of game too, right?
Yeah.
So it's
oh yeah,
you definitely get a little bit of that spirit of playing the villain on your other players as well. What's everybody's favorite version of Villainous?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think the at least the first Marvel one I think was my favorite. Some of the Marvel villains are just a lot of fun for me, but I like those better than some of the cartoon villains and stuff like that.
I mean, and I've played. What did we? Star Wars Villainous. That was fun. I like playing Boba Fett in that, but I still think I like the Disney character villains. I don't have a favorite one, but I do prefer the Disney ones over the Star Wars and the Marvel. Just because, I don't know, they have their whole backstories and I grew up with them and they can be kind of goofy. I don't know, but how about you, Justin? What do you...
This is one I haven't played, actually.
You haven't played this?
I have not played Villainous.
You have kids and you haven't played this one?
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I've heard good things. It's just one I haven't ever had the chance. I could definitely see myself getting into Star Wars version or Marvel, but like, yeah, I think it's actually a pretty interesting idea just to like play some of these classic Disney villains too. That does sound fun.
Yeah. How about Ben?
No, so there's definitely a scaling in the rules between the three different versions of Villainous. I think they all have a really cool place. I definitely am a huge Maleficent fan and like being able to play Maleficent in the original Disney Villainous. But if I had to pick my favorite version of Villainous, I think I'm going to lean a little bit more to the Marvel Villainous because it adds just an extra little layer that isn't quite in the base game. Of course, the Star Wars Villainous also has another extra little layer, and I really enjoyed it, but I've only played it once, so it's hard for me to say that's my favorite. But I think my favorite version is going to definitely be right now the Marvel Villainous, but my favorite Villainous character is Maleficent.
Nice.
From my point of view, you kind of leading on that, like, everybody, let's play bad guys. One of my games that has been in my top 10, and before we were talking and preparing for the show, somebody went like, hey, we're surprised it's not on your list. And I went, oh yeah, that game's got all bad guys. How did I forget? And I've played it relatively recently, and that's Cthulhu Wars from Peterson Games. Cthulhu Wars is definitely that game where you're playing as one of many terrifying beings controlling one of the terrifying factions in the mythos, whether it's the Great Cthulhu, the King in Yellow, or any of the number of other factions, and summoning, your cultists are summoning the various monsters, and you're ultimately trying to take down the world and destroy or rule over humanity before those pesky humans manage to defeat all of the players. And everybody's playing one of these mythos, and it's great. And there's war on the tabletop, and you're trying to usurp the most power you can to try to do rituals of annihilation and like I said, prevent the humans from winning the game, because that would be bad. And I don't think I've seen that. I've seen that happen a couple of times in recent plays. It's definitely a very conflict laden, which is very villain. Like nobody can agree to work together. It's very conflict ridden in a game that's not horribly punishing if you lose a couple of conflicts against other players. So yeah, that's Cthulhu Wars. I'm definitely one of my favorites, and of course, it's got bigatures, which are awesome, and that's basically giant miniatures. Some of the biggest board game miniatures in a board game that I've ever played with.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the, in my opinion, draws of that particular game is you're pushing around these giant, like it's got a great table presence. I'll just say it that way.
I mean, you can have glow in the dark great old ones. It's great.
They look pretty cool on the windowsill when they're glowing.
Yeah. I mean, we had our neighbors at the old house ask about like what those were.
Yeah. Well, you see something kind of creepy glowing in the basement window of your neighbor's house, you're going to probably question it or stay away from them, but we need like light up ones that like you put an LED light underneath them and then they like light up as you're playing. That'd be cool. But that gets away from it is fun though with how like you can just stomp on other factions and everything in that game, and
yeah,
I don't know. I like attacky games.
I mean, the only thing better would be is if they make noise. That would be awesome. It'd be little tentacle squishes and things. That would be awesome.
I see somebody making a mobile app so that you can pull out your tablet
and just make the noise.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you know what? Next time we play, I'm gonna get like little noisemakers of different types and put it by each person's faction, and they can just hit the whoopee cushion or blow on the kazoo or something. And Justin's probably looking at me like, I'm not playing it with you then. Nope. I won't be over there.
Imagine what Cthulhu sounds like as a kazoo.
I don't know.
How about you, Justin? What's on your list?
Cthulhu is the play there. So my first one is goes in a little bit of a different direction. The first game I picked is Call to Adventure. Call to Adventure is a game where you build the story of an epic hero or anti-hero. You start the game out with humble origin. You might be a hunter, a beggar, an acolyte, something like that. And your character starts with a motivation, a thirst for knowledge, a vow of vengeance, or they're tempted by darkness. And then you sort of have a destiny, a goal that you want to see achieved by your character. So you might want to become a paragon of light, or a cunning villain, or even worse, a force of darkness. So the game is set up to basically let you build the story of a character who could be a mighty hero. They could be sort of a gray area like thief, Thieves Guild guy, Thieves Guild master, something like that. Or you can truly be like the dark wizard who takes over the world. When you play the game, you take on these trait cards to build up your character. So, for the good side, you might pick up a trait like honorable or enlightened. But then there's sort of negative or more evil traits like rebellious or criminal. And those add abilities to your character and sort of determine what your strengths are in terms of essentially basic D&D ability scores, strength, dexterity, wisdom, charisma, that kind of thing. And you use those to attempt challenges. Here's where the good and evil thing comes in again. Every challenge you have, you're going to have two paths to pick from. A lot of them have sort of a light path and a dark path. For some examples, one of the challenges is a murder mystery. And one of the paths you can choose to do is to solve the mystery, with certain sets of skills. But then the other option is to conceal your crime, which is sort of the negative path and requires a different set of skills. You might come across a street gang as a challenge. And one option is to outwit the gang boss, or you could take over the gang and become the gang boss. You can become a champion of the light or servant of the darkness as you get the option to meet your divine calling. So the whole game is kind of presenting you these choices to like build a hero or build a villain. There are cards called hero and anti-hero cards that get you special actions and abilities that you can use that you'll earn for doing like more heroic or more villainous things. So it really does like incentivize you to build your character to kind of go one way or the other. Those cards that you get in the beginning, like your destiny, will determine like what things you might score for during the game. So if you pick something like the Force of Darkness destiny, like your goal is to basically become as corrupt and as evil and like tragic of a story as you can, because you're going to get more points for those things. It's a very fun game to build this story where you might start out as a beggar, you get conscripted by the army and you turn to a life of crime, and you take over the gang, and you sort of slowly move your way onto the side of evil and get more powerful and darker as you go. You can always build a hero, that's fine, but it's very fun in this game too to go the dark path and build a villain. That's one of my uh games for becoming a villain and actually building the villain as you're playing the game and building their story. Pretty cool.
That does sound really cool. Yeah, I think I've looked at this game, but I've never played it. But that's cool that you can create a villain and like choose to do the different, what direction do my choices lead me in?
Yeah.
That's really
It's a pretty simple game. It has some other cool mechanics, like your abilities are represented by these little rune stones, and every time you're attempting a challenge, you like cast the runes, and depending on how many successes come up on the runes that you cast onto the table, you can like win or lose the challenge that you're facing. It's a pretty unique little game. Definitely kind of in a storytelling genre more than like a really hardcore strategy game or anything like that. But there's definitely a strategy that you're looking to optimize. Like, I want to get as much points as I can out of my evil challenges that I've completed or whatever. So, yeah, it's a cool one. I'd recommend it.
Yeah, very cool. But yeah, have you played Called Adventure?
I've not. I'm very much like you, Suzanne. I've seen it in the board game store a lot, and every time I've seen it, it looks interesting, but I've just never picked it up.
Yeah, I'll have to bring it sometime.
Yeah, it sounds
Definitely.
interesting.
Definitely. I always was thinking it was some sort of like RPG-ish game, and I think that's why I never quite grabbed it, because I wanted something that you could just play one-offs of.
So, speaking of RPGs, one of the things that I have on my list is actually Dungeons and Dragons, which is, there's definitely board game versions of this. There's a lot of scenarios where different Dungeons and Dragons board games, but even the pen and paper version depends on your DM. But I've heard of some groups that do entire games where they all play bad people. Not my cup of tea, but I do some DMing as well. And I will say, sometimes being the dungeon master, it is just a lot of fun to take this two-dimensional bad guy that might be part of a module or part of a book, and breathe life into them for your characters. So that can be a lot of fun. And I will say, I'm the first person that might say playing the bad guy isn't generally my cup of tea. Like, I'll never generally play as a player as a as a bad person, but as a DM, it can just be a heck of a lot of fun to play that bad guy and just kind of breathe life into them for your players. So
I think as a forever DM myself, or a forever game master myself, regardless of the RPG, Dungeons and Dragons being the one I'm currently running the most, I absolutely agree. I think there is a satisfaction at bringing a villainous character to life and seeing the heroes get very excited or key in on certain villains, the players keying in on certain characters that you're dropping in and going, oh yeah, I don't like that guy, I want to thwart what they're doing, or that character or that monster or whatever it is. And then being able to provide that reoccurring villainous arc to things is really cool. Like we talk about Rime of the Frost Maiden, and not to give too many things away, but there's a character that's one of the early missions where you need to neutralize basically this character that's got icy blue eyes and whatnot. And well, lo and behold, our party after a few sessions deals with them, but it was such a cool introduction to the overall story of the campaign that of course I had to make that somehow reoccur within the campaign, if for nothing else but to feed on some of the original fun that I think everybody was having with the first iteration of this character. So it was very fun to be able to bring those kind of and to bring those kind of elements to the table as a villain. Always a fun time. Could be and being able to enable that through an RPG is especially fun. It does take a special group of players to play as all villains, though, I have found, and so I generally don't allow too many villainous players in my games, but it is definitely a fun time. I know,
So
Justin, you spent a bunch of time in the DM's chair for games as well.
yeah, I mean, certainly not as much as you have. I like to like one thing I'm doing in a campaign that I'm running right now is doing the thing where you drop little hints into sessions about an upcoming threat. Someone's looking for you. You don't know who it is. They have some hints at like who it might be or what the reason is for them being pursued or whatever. Maybe it's someone from their backstory. Maybe it's a totally new villain altogether. And I love to build that character up in the background with little hints and little foreshadowings to make that ultimate encounter that they'll have with the villain down the line that much more impactful. Like I think you were talking about it with the way you built up this character we fought against in Rime of the Frost Maiden. You took it from just, maybe a one-off guy to like a multi-session threat that we like built. It became our villain. It was like our first villain. So I really like that ability to draw the players in, I should say, by hinting at a villain, by having them do things, in the background and unexpected things, and like they have some dark dream or some omen that they see that they don't fully understand the meaning of, but maybe if they kind of piece things together, it would point them, to the villain. And then you get to eventually have that reveal of the villain, like, oh, it was, this guy all along or whatever. uh,
Yeah.
that I find very satisfying.
Yep, absolutely. And then hopefully that encounter lives up to everything you've been building it up to. So
that's the trick, right? Making it
nothing worse than doing all that work building up an encounter and then having the party wipe it in like one round of combat.
But you do get, the benefit there is, hey, your players feel like badasses. So there's always that benefit.
Come on, Ben. It took us 2 rounds. No.
True. But kind of on that line of one versus many, Suzanne, did we had, oh no, Justin, you had a one versus many game on your list. You want to tell us about that?
Yes, one that fairly recent game that I've been playing a bit is called Beast from Studio Midhall. And yeah, so this is a one versus many, a hidden movement game where one player plays a great beast that is rampaging across the land. Well, maybe it's safer to say they're sneaking across the land while the other players act as hunters, trying to hunt them down and kill them. When you're the beast, you're clearly the villain. You're hiding, moving around the map, killing animals, attacking settlers in their villages, and your main goal is basically to kill a bunch of settlers in different villages scattered across this map before the hunters, the other players can find and defeat you. Like I said, it's a hidden movement game, so the players are always trying to deduce where you're at any given time. they get spread out over the map and can kind of slowly move their way towards you and figure out, oh, I see monster footsteps over here, so maybe he went this way. Or they have ways of kind of flushing you out to some degree. But as you play through the game, both the players and the monster have goals every round that they're trying to accomplish. And as you accomplish these goals, they have like killing some number of animals for the beast, you get currency to spend to gain more power. So you improve your abilities, you get stronger, you might get stronger attack actions, you might get new special abilities to let you do different kind of actions. And so that threat that you represent as the beast grows can grow each round and present even more challenge to the players as you go on. So that's one aspect that I really like about it, is that, you might start out a little more vulnerable and you got to be sneakier. But then, oh, now I've got this cool power. Now I can really start making some moves because I've leveled up a little bit and really start becoming more aggressive. It's definitely a more defensive kind of villain role than something like, playing the DM and playing characters against the players as a DM, or another kind of one versus many game, because you are vulnerable. Like, the players outnumber you, they get to coordinate and track you down. So you can't be outright aggressive all the time. You do have to kind of be more of a cunning villain. You got to be sneaky. You got to plan your moments and attack when it's like the right exact moment, and then you can disappear back into the night. So it's a sneakier, more cunning kind of villain that you're playing in this game, but very satisfying to play. I think I've had a really good time playing the Beast a number of different times as I played this. The beast you play gets special abilities. There's different beasts, like a giant wolf, a giant boar, kind of like vampire type creatures, stuff like that. And they all have special abilities. And the players get a unique character that they get to play as a hunter, which all have their own special abilities. So there's, lots of replayability from that aspect. And it's one of the few games that I own personally where there's clearly a villain role. And that I have been able to be that villain multiple times.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of games in this genre that go with Beast. I've had the fortune to play Beast once, and I really did enjoy it. But like the Stifling Dark from our friends over at Sophisticated Cerberus Games, where playing kind of the supernatural killer in a scenario, or one of the most classic games in this genre, Fury of Dracula. Or if you weren't into the hunting down Dracula or playing as Dracula, of course, then there's Letters from Whitechapel, is also another classic in this genre, where you're playing basically the Jack the Ripper type character. So there's a lot of these games where it's you don't know where the villain is. They're sneaking around, they're doing their thing, and it's the player's responsibility to hunt the villain down. And those are always a ton of fun, and always the players are usually in a head scratching, how do you stop them, because we only know so much, and we never, if it's done well, the players usually never have quite all of the answers.
Yeah, definitely. It takes some actual villainous skill from the part of the player to do it well, and be sneaky enough, and not sort of leave themselves out in the open too much. So it's one of those genres where you kind of got to think like a villain a little bit to play it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in these style of games, in particular, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or another role playing game, or at least when I sit in that role as the villain in a game like Beast, which I haven't played as the villain yet, but I have in games like The Stifling Dark and Letters from Whitechapel, and et cetera, is that it kind of also are in a position where you're reading the room. We're reading are your players having fun? Are the players enjoying it? Do the players feel like they have a chance? Because if they don't feel like they have a chance, if they feel like they're getting beat down a little too much, that's almost always where I'm like, I'm just gonna do something a little silly that might end up making me lose the game, but it helps get them more engaged. or more engaged with this encounter, or gives them like instead of feeling like, oh hey, there's no chance, oh hey, there's potentially the light. Of course, then I love it when I'm able to quash that light right at the end. But it's always good to be able to quash that in those kind of hidden movement, hidden villain type games.
You also like making all the voices that go along with the villain as he's sneaking up and all the flavor commentary about what's happening on there.
I like putting on that performance. Yes, absolutely. I like when I'm playing the villain in Stifling Dark. I like embellishing a little bit that all of a sudden out of the darkness you see glowing red eyes. Here, take a token. and you feel like giving because I think like in that game you're trying to, if you're playing to the atmosphere of the game, hopefully the players are feeling a little dread, whereas in Beast I know from the player perspective I felt like the whole game like I was hunting this creature that was doing these things and terrorizing the land, and then we were going to hunt it down. We were the angry mob set to take care of the beast. And I really did feel like that in the game. And when you're getting that flavor feel with these hidden movement games coming out, that's awesome. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, one thing at least when I play these games that Conzi is the villain or the bad guy in, it's definitely, he has this, excitement and energy level that he brings to it, where I feel like it's hard to replicate that if you're the good guys in some of those games. So I think it would be fun. Like it makes me want to try and be the bad guy in some games. Just it seems like it's this whole other level of gaming and fun with those particular ones. So
yeah, it definitely is. And feeding into that kind of, we talked about the one versus many where it's hidden movement and hidden information in games like Beast and Stifling Dark and Fury of Dracula. There is that other genre where it's everything is displayed on the map and one player is the overlord or controlling player for those pieces and the other players are encountering them. And one of my favorites in that style of game is Star Wars Imperial Assault. We've had a couple of campaigns now with that game where I played as the Overlord controlling the forces of the Empire and watching the heroes most of the time win scenarios. But especially in that first campaign, I felt a little special amount of villainy when the players spread themselves out overconfidently in this facility, and then as the door opens and a red lightsaber blazes to life and starts cutting down player after player. It was masterfully delightful and it was great. But it was an awesome build up in both of those campaigns. Other games that I like that are really fit in this genre, like things like Batman Gotham City Chronicles, Conan. Both of those are from Monolith Games and run on kind of a similar engine. Descent. There are a lot of games where there's an overlord versus heroes. It's a really common theme you see in a lot of dungeon crawl-esque type games, and it's a lot of fun. And especially if those are linked games where they're being all played together in an overall story or narrative, where you can kind of see that come together too, and you can see, as your villainous overlord is plotting and planning and doing these things that the heroes are trying to stop you, that you can, yes, I do not care if they win that mission, but this mission I perhaps want to spend my resources, tap into my villainy a little bit more, because this mission here, I do not want those heroes to get the reward. It was a lot of fun to do that kind of stuff. And it was definitely an interesting game mechanic, and particularly Star Wars Imperial Assault, to be able to make those decisions from game to game in the villaincy. So that is the one versus many, but the other aspect of it, more on the like dungeon crawler, where you really know where everything is. You know where all the villains models are and enemies are as you explore the map or explore the the encounter. So I think there was yet another style of games on this list that we definitely thought we should give mention to. Suzanne, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you thought of for these types of games?
Yes, so this is probably my favorite, actually, my all-time favorite type of game to play the bad guy in would be miniature games, specifically the Batman miniature game. So I've played some of Suicide Squad, which, if you know the movies, they're like bad guys that got arrested with superpowers and then are like doing good stuff, but you're still just crushing people and destroying things. And then even my Birds of Prey crew that I've played has some people that are questionable if they're good or bad on it. So I think that's a lot of fun. You know, again, you're playing out kind of, you know, like when you're a little kid and you have your action figures, but this is much more, there are rules with this. And it's, you know, it's just a fun way to also embody and pretend that you are these characters flying around or smashing down things. And I know some of the others of you play miniature games where you're bad guys, especially I know Conzi loves being his Joker and Riddler.
Yes. I love being the Joker and playing him because you know what? I don't have a plan when I'm playing the Joker. But everything's fun, especially when I let them in on the joke.
Yeah.
And then he laughs like that the entire time you're playing him.
Yeah, it's part of the fun.
Is there always is there always a villain in a scenario when you're playing Batman miniature game, or is it like just depend on the crew that people bring? Like, is there always a two-sided thing, or?
It depends on the crew that people bring, and then this is true for most miniature games. You collect your crew of miniatures, and the rules are structured in a way that you can play against another crew that is even from the same faction. Like two Batman crews could totally fight against each other, but usually the games that are well, even in those games, I'm like, you're the corrupt Batman, and then there's usually finger pointing, and
Yeah.
somebody finds out that they were arrested and hauled off to Arkham Asylum. But in Batman, I think some of the more rewarding, fun games that I play personally are the ones where it's a villain. Well, villain on villains are fine because villains on villains fight all the time in the comics and movies. But when you're fighting the villains on heroes and not having a heroes on heroes matchup, those are some of my favorites. Although plenty of times in the comic books, Nightwing's taking on Batman or some other similar things. So those kind of things can happen on the tabletop, which is awesome. But it goes for any miniature game, whether it's like Warhammer 40K or Age of Sigmar or Warhammer the Old World, leading back to some of our roots back in Square Bases here at Wisco Dice. There are plenty of villainous factions, chaos, and whatnot in those games that you build your army for, and then you can take on perfectly good, or at least kind of maybe good guys in the Warhammer worlds, because you start looking at the lore at characters and armies in the Warhammer world and start to realize that the good guys probably aren't as good as they think they are. Yeah. But yeah, like almost all of the miniature games are in some form of structure like that. I think, Suzanne, there was one other game that's kind of miniature-esque where the Golden Girls are definitely the villains.
Only when I play them against your Batman crews. So I do enjoy Funkoverse with the big bobble-ish head, you know, cartoonish guys that you move around. And there are some villains. You can choose to be a villain in there. And again, you're acting out, hey, this is what I think this villain acts like. I do not view the Golden Girls as villains in that. So I usually play that, but they're pretty nasty. In there.
No way.
Joker and stuff.
There's no way those old ladies are that good if they haven't sold their souls to the devil himself. I'm just saying.
I guess if you know Golden Girls, you probably can pick one of the four of them that's more villainous than the other two. Whether, it might be Sophia or Blanche, and I think those two are probably the meanest in the Funkoverse, so...
I have to say, I am now intrigued and need to see this matchup.
It's pretty awesome. They use their womanly wiles against the opponent, and they throw cake or cheesecake at them because cheesecake solves everything. So
that is not how I would typically feel like using the word womanly wiles, but I'll take it.
There's the one thing too that pulls away character actions. I think that they can do. It's because that game is definitely all about action efficiency, and so when all of a sudden you lose a character that you can't do anything with in a turn, and you're both sides have 3 characters, that can be absolutely devastating in a game that's you're racing for points. And Suzanne absolutely loves doing that to me over and over and over. It's so painful, and she is so villainous when she does it.
I will say with Funkoverse, it goes better if you know outside the game what the motivation for your character and what they're like. Conesy, if you would study the Golden Girls with me in the middle of the night and watch all of the episodes over and over, then you'll know what to expect.
This is her villainy coming out. Absolutely. And on that bombshell, I think we've covered a lot of games that you could be the villain in that are a ton of fun. Hopefully, some of these games are games that you've all played. But if there's a game that we didn't say that you love being the villain in, let us know. We want to hear it. Drop onto our Discord and send us a message that way, or anywhere on our social media, or if you're listening to this on YouTube, drop a comment on it. We appreciate it so much, and it goes a long way to helping us out, and we love interacting and finding out about more games. I can't tell you the number of times somebody suggested a game on one of these things, and I was like, I really want to play that now. Suzanne, how do we get a copy? So, thanks for listening, and we'll catch up next time.
Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you leave a review of this show wherever your favorite place is to find podcasts. Oh, and by the way, give us a like on our Facebook page. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Pinterest while you're at it. If you haven't looked recently, make sure you catch up on the blog at wiscodice.com. Hey, Brian, what's that site?
Oh, darn, I forget. Justin, what's our website again?
Wiscodice.com.
That's right, it's wiscodice.com. And until next time, everyone, peace out. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you leave a review of this show wherever your favorite place is to find podcasts. Oh, and by the way, give us a like on our Facebook page. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Pinterest while you're at it. If you haven't looked recently, make sure you catch up on the blog at wiscodice.com. Hey, Brian, what's that site?
Oh, darn, I forget. Justin, what's our website again?
Wiscodice.com.
That's right, it's wiscodice.com. And until next time, everyone, peace out.